Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into the story of Canada, a really vast and, well, incredibly varied country.
Absolutely. And we're not just listing facts today.
No, definitely not. We want to get into the real narrative, how it came to be, what makes it tick, and maybe uncover some surprising details along the way.
That's the plan. We've sifted through a lot of information, and our mission really is to pull out the most compelling bits for you.
Kind of a shortcut to understanding Canada.
Exactly. Connecting the dots, hopefully making it engaging.
Okay, so where do we start this adventure? The name itself.
Yeah, let's do that. The name Canada. It actually tells a story. It comes from an Iroquoian word,
Oh, okay.
specifically the St. Lawrence Iroquoian word Kanata.
Kanata, and that means?
It means village or settlement. Pretty simple, right?
Village.
So picture this. 1535, French explorer Jacques Cartier arrives near what's now Quebec City. He meets some indigenous inhabitants, and they use Kanata to point him towards the village of Stadacona.
Just pointing the way to the village.
Exactly. But Cartier, well, he started using the word Canada more broadly to refer to the whole area under the local chief, Donnacona.
So it expanded from village to region pretty quickly in his mind.
Seems like it. And by 1545, so just 10 years later, you start seeing European maps and books using Canada for that whole region along the St. Lawrence River.
Wow. From village to the name of a future nation. That's quite something.
It really is a fascinating story.
And that name points back to the people who were there long before Cartier, right? The indigenous peoples.
Absolutely. Their history in what we now call Canada goes back, well, millennia, thousands and thousands of years.
I'm talking deep history.
Deep history. Think about archaeological sites like Old Crow Flats, Bluefish Caves.
I've heard of those. Yukon, right?
Yeah. Evidence there suggests human habitation going back at least 14,000 years, maybe even longer.
14,000 years. It's hard to even grasp that time scale.
It is. And these weren't just small, scattered groups. Over time, complex societies developed.
With settlements.
Permanent settlements, yeah. Agriculture in many areas, complex social structures, hierarchies, even extensive trading networks across the continent.
So established civilizations.
Definitely. It's crucial to remember that. Sadly, many of these vibrant cultures had already declined or disappeared by the time Europeans started arriving in larger numbers in the late 15th, early 16th centuries.
Which brings us to that next major chapter, the arrival of the British and French.
Right. Starting along the Atlantic coast in the 16th century. And that inevitably led to competition.
And conflict, I assume.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Various armed conflicts between European powers and also involving indigenous nations, of course. It was a turbulent period.
Leading up to.
A major turning point in 1763. After the 7 Years' War, Grant ceded almost all of his North American colonies, including New France, to Great Britain.
Wow. So British dominance was established then?
Pretty much across what would become Canada, yes.
Yeah.
That really set the stage for the next phase.
Which takes us to 1867, Confederation.
Exactly. A huge moment. 3 British North American colonies decided to, well, unite.
That was Ontario, Quebec.
Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Those 4.
They formed a federal dominion, right, called Canada.
That's it. The Dominion of Canada, initially just those 4 provinces. But it was designed to grow.
And grow it did. More provinces joined, territories were added, covering this vast northern expanse.
A process that continued for decades. But it's important to acknowledge this expansion often came at a real cost.
For indigenous people.
Yes. Displacement, broken treaties, assimilation policies, a very difficult and often tragic part of the story.
Okay, so Canada is formed in 1867, but it's still a dominion within the British Empire. How did it get to full independence?
It was a very gradual process, not like a single revolutionary war or declaration.
War of an evolution.
Precisely. A key step was the Statute of Westminster in 1931.
What did that do?
It basically recognized Canada, along with other dominions like Australia and New Zealand, as autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status, not subordinate.
So self-governing, but still linked to Britain.
Right. The king was still head of state. But crucially, British Parliament couldn't pass laws for Canada anymore unless Canada asked for it.
Okay. But there were still some remaining legal ties.
Yes, particularly concerning the Constitution. Canada couldn't amend its own constitution entirely without involving the UK Parliament. That lasted quite a while.
Until?
Until 1982. That's when the Canada Act was passed.
The final step.
Pretty much the final legal step. It patriated the Constitution. meaning it brought it fully under Canadian control, severing that last major legal dependence on the British Parliament.
And that's also when Dominion Day changed its name.
Exactly. Symbolic timing. In 1982, July 1st became officially known as Canada Day.
So from Canada the village, through Dominion status to full independence in 1982. Quite a journey.
A long and complex one, definitely.
Yeah. Let's talk about how Canada works today then. It's a parliamentary democracy.
Yes, and a constitutional monarchy. It follows the Westminster tradition, similar to the UK.
Meaning there's a parliament, an elected prime minister.
Right. The prime minister is the head of government, leading the party with the most seats in the House of Commons.
But it's also a monarchy.
A constitutional one.
Yeah.
The monarch of Canada, currently King Charles III, is the head of state, but it's a largely ceremonial role.
Represented by the Governor General.
Exactly. The Governor General performs the monarch's duties in Canada, like giving royal assent to legislation, but acts on the advice of the government.
And it's officially bilingual.
At the federal level, yes. English and French have equal status in federal institutions, parliament, courts.
That reflects the history with Britain and France.
Absolutely. And Canada generally ranks pretty high globally on things like, well, government transparency, quality of life.
Human rights, economic competitiveness too, I think.
Yeah, it consistently scores well in those international comparisons.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The geography. It's huge.
It's huge. It's immense. Second largest country in the world by total area.
Total area. What's the distinction?
Well, total area includes land and freshwater bodies.
Yeah.
By land area alone, it's fourth because...
Lakes.
So many. Lakes. Canada has an incredible amount of the world's freshwater resources tied up in its lakes and rivers. Over 2 million lakes, apparently.
2 million! Wow. And the coastline. I heard something crazy about the coastline.
You probably did. It has the world's longest coastline. By far.
How long are we talking?
Get this, 243,042 kilometers.
I can't even picture that. 250,000 kilometers almost.
It's mind-boggling, stretching along the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic Oceans.
And it shares the world's longest land border too, right? With the U.S.
Correct. Over 8,800 kilometers long.
And here's a cool fact I read. Canada's home to the world's northernmost settlement.
That's right. Canadian Forces Station Alert up on Ellesmere Island in Nunavut.
How far north is that?
It's only about 817 kilometers from the actual North Pole.
Wow.
Oh.
Talk about remote.
Definitely an extreme environment.
And the landscape itself isn't uniform, is it? It's incredibly varied.
Hugely varied.
Yeah.
Geographers often divide it into 7 main physiographic regions.
Like?
Well, you've got the Western Cordillera, I think the Rocky Mountains, rugged peaks.
Right. Beautiful but challenging terrain.
Then you have the interior plains, or the prairies. Vast, relatively flat agricultural land.
The breadbasket.
And then the massive Canadian Shield, covering a huge part of central and eastern Canada. Ancient rock, forests, lakes.
The core of the continent, almost?
In a geological sense, yeah. Plus you have the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence lowlands, the Appalachian region in the east, the Hudson Bay lowlands, and the Arctic archipelago up north. Immense diversity.
And dominated by boreal forests in many areas.
Yes, vast stretches of boreal forest, crucial ecosystems.
So this huge, diverse geography, how does that relate to the people, the Canadian identity?
Well, that's another layer of complexity and diversity. Canada is known as one of the world's most ethnically diverse and multicultural nations.
Largely due to immigration.
Absolutely. It's a country built, in many ways, by waves of immigration from all over the globe, continuing today.
And multiculturalism isn't just a fact on the ground, it's policy, right?
Yes, it's an official state policy, enshrined in law. The idea is to recognize and celebrate the diverse cultural heritages of Canadians.
How diverse are we talking?
The 2021 census gives you an idea. People self-reported over 450 different ethnic or cultural origins.
450, that's incredible.
It shows the sheer mix of backgrounds that make up the country today. It's often seen as a key part of the Canadian identity, this emphasis on inclusiveness.
So the culture itself is a blend.
Definitely. You have the foundational British and French influences, obviously, and the vital ongoing presence and influence of Indigenous cultures.
And then layers upon layers from other groups.
Exactly. Irish, German, Ukrainian, Italian, Chinese, South Asian, Caribbean, African. The list goes on, contributing to food, music, arts, everything.
And there seems to be a strong emphasis on certain values, like social justice.
Generally speaking, yes. Things like the publicly funded healthcare system, Medicare, are often pointed to.
Right. And no capital punishment.
Correct. Efforts to alleviate poverty, a focus on equality rights. These are often highlighted as part of that Canadian value system, though obviously there are ongoing debates and challenges within that.
Okay, let's pause here for just a moment. If you're finding this deep dive into Canada's story as fascinating as we are, make sure you hit that subscribe button.
Yeah, don't miss out on future explorations here on Tell Me More. We've got plenty more stories lined up.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked history, geography, identity. What about Canada's role in the world?
It's generally seen as a middle power. Not a superpower, but influential.
Known for peacekeeping.
Historically, yes. Canada played a big role in developing and participating in UN peacekeeping missions for decades. That direct contribution has decreased significantly in recent years, though.
But still involved internationally.
Oh, yes. Very committed to multilateralism, working through international organizations like the UN, the G7, the G20, the Commonwealth, and still active in global security, particularly through NATO.
And providing foreign aid.
Yes, it's a significant provider of development assistance to other nations.
Okay, and economically. Developed country, high income.
Yes, a large, advanced economy. And interestingly, it relies heavily on two things: natural resources and international trade.
Resources like oil.
Big time, especially in Alberta with the oil sands. Canada has some of the largest proven oil reserves globally. Also lots of natural gas, minerals, timber.
So it's a net exporter of energy. That's unusual for a developed country, isn't it?
It is, yeah, one of the few. And it's also a huge agricultural producer and exporter. Think wheat, canola.
Feeding the world, basically.
A significant part of it, yes.
What about science and tech? Any big Canadian contributions?
Definitely. Some really key ones. Insulin, for example, was discovered by Canadian researchers Banting, Best, MacLeod, and Collip. Huge medical breakthrough.
Wow, insulin. Okay.
The polio vaccine involved Canadian researchers, too. And on a more everyday level, the modern alkaline battery was invented by a Canadian, Louis Urey.
Didn't know that. The alkaline battery.
Yep. And Canada generally ranks well in scientific research output and has very high rates of internet access across its population.
Let's talk symbols. What screams Canada?
The maple leaf, right? Has to be number one.
On the flag, obviously.
On the flag since 1965, on the coat of arms. It's everywhere. There's even an official Canadian tartan, and its colors are meant to represent the changing colors of the maple leaf through the seasons.
That's cool. What else?
The beaver.
Ah, yes, the industrious beaver.
A symbol of the fur trade history, known for its hard work. It's on the nickel.
Okay. Any others?
The Canada goose is pretty iconic, though sometimes controversial depending on where you live.
Ah, yeah.
And the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, or Mounties, are a very recognizable symbol, too.
Right, the red serge uniform.
Exactly.
And sports. What's the national sport? Hockey.
Well, yes and no. Ice hockey is the official winter national sport.
Ah, there's a distinction.
There is. The official summer national sport is lacrosse.
Lacrosse. Okay, reflecting Indigenous heritage there, too.
Precisely. It has deep roots in Indigenous cultures. But yeah, Canada has a huge sporting culture overall. Hosted the Olympics several times.
Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal.
Right. Hosted the FIFA Women's World Cup. And they're set to co-host the Men's FIFA World Cup in 2026 with the U.S. and Mexico.
Lots going on. Now, you mentioned surprising details earlier. I think the story of Newfoundland fits that bill.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really unique, almost forgotten piece of 20th century history.
So Newfoundland wasn't originally part of Canada in 1867?
No, it was a separate British dominion, like Canada. But it was hit incredibly hard by the Great Depression in the 1930s.
Financially devastated.
Totally. To the point where in 1934, the Dominion of Newfoundland actually gave up its self-government.
Huh.
Voluntarily.
Gave it up. What happened?
It reverted to being a crown colony, ruled directly by a British-appointed governor and a commission of government. Essentially, London took over because the country was bankrupt.
Wow. A part of North America becoming a colony again in the 1930s. That's wild.
Isn't it? And it stayed that way through World War II. After the war, the question was, what next?
Independence. Stay with Britain. Join Canada.
Those were the options. They held two referendums in 1948.
Two. Why two?
The first one didn't produce a majority for any single option. The second one was a runoff between staying as a crown colony, responsible government, and joining Canada.
And joining Canada won.
Barely. It was very close, about 52% to 48%. But yes, Newfoundlanders voted to join.
So in 1949, Newfoundland became Canada's 10th province.
That's right. A really unusual path to Confederation.
What a story. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main threads we've pulled together about Canada?
Well, we've seen this incredibly long indigenous presence shaping the land for millennia.
Right, the foundation.
Then the transformative, often difficult impact of European colonization and conflict.
Leading to that gradual, unique journey towards independence.
Exactly. And alongside that, the constant process of building a national identity across this absolutely immense and diverse landscape.
An identity heavily defined by multiculturalism, maybe more so than many other places.
That seems to be a central theme, yes.
Yes.
An ongoing experiment in diversity and inclusion.
And full of surprises, like the origin of the name Canada itself, or that Newfoundland story.
Definitely. It's a narrative of resilience, constant adaptation, and this ongoing question of what it means to be Canadian in a world that keeps changing.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for listeners to chew on.
Yeah.
How does a country with such deep historical divisions, Indigenous, French, British, and now countless other cultures and such vast geographical differences, actually maintain a sense of national cohesion?
That's a big question. What holds it together?
And maybe, what lessons, if any, can other parts of the world learn from Canada's specific approach to multiculturalism, warts and all, or its role as a middle power?
Lots to think about there. It's not a perfect picture, of course, but it's a fascinating case study.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration of Canada's story here on Tell Me More Stories Told As podcast.
Hope you found it insightful.
We really hope it sparked your curiosity and gave you some things to remember. We definitely encourage you to dig deeper into any parts that caught your interest.
There's always more to the story. Until next time, keep asking questions.
And keep learning.